from less than 100,000 Rand a month to more than 4 million Rand in turnover in less than 2 months.
So I imagine it's like you're almost starting again from scratch in many ways because the problems are so different.
I had to almost unlearn everything I knew about retail, about e-commerce, about technology, and then really listen to the market and reconnect the dots again.
The nature of scaling and why I love it is because you start encountering problems that you didn't think you would have to solve.
Because if you're now a business that is visible, then you'll have gangsters that are aware of a business that is coming through and that is transporting value. So now you become a target.
I know that so many people have tried and failed. How did you manage to get it right in the first place?
The challenge is also the beauty of the situation.
What are the changes that you've gone through as a leader in order to be able to grow yourself, to be able to handle these new stages that the business went through? Hello and welcome back to the Founder Files. Today I'm talking to Jessica Boonstra, who is the founder and CEO of Yebo Fresh. Now this is an episode of quite pure storytelling and a lot about leadership, right? Because the nature and story of Yebo Fresh is constant pivoting, going from being a B2C e-commerce business before COVID to completely pivoting to meal delivery, working with NGOs during COVID, to then being a player within the spaza shop space post-COVID, now being acquired by Smollan Group and taking this to a whole nother scale. It's quite a journey that Jessica's been on with the business. For example, going from 6 to 60 people in 3 weeks, for example, during COVID, now being a business of 220 people within the Smollan Group and just having a completely new level of vision. So we just talk about the nature and challenges of building a business like this, but also a business in South Africa, and how she as a white Dutch woman came into the Township economy or the general trade economy within South Africa and how she navigated the space. How is it that she succeeded and the challenges that she faced in scale that were unexpected, besides the standard operating procedures needed, but now being a target for crime and gangsterism, but dealing with fraud and people internally within the business, engaging with gangsters and helping them really steal from the business and how to navigate this. And the insights that she's learned as a leader to really balance compassion with human beings, but also being hard on performance. And there's a great principle that I'll leave for the podcast there. And then we really get into leadership and how she's grown and evolved and the humility that she has, the learning that she has, and how she's continuing to push moving forward. So we get personal, we get deep, we get into the nature of being South African and certain South African challenges. So this is a deep dive in really pure South African entrepreneurship, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy that. Now, if you aren't currently following the podcast, this is maybe the first time you're finding out about us, right? There are so many stories that we get into in terms of the depth of what it means to be a founder, what it means to be an entrepreneur in South Africa, and everything from the practicalities of how is it that we build out operations to how we need to evolve as leaders, to how we deal with people, how we deal with crime. That there's so many golden nuggets and insights from every specific founder that we get on this podcast. So if this is something that you're interested in, if you want to be learning and getting, mentoring sessions at scale from other founders just like you, then you want to make sure that you are following, that you are subscribed to the podcast now. And that way you can make sure that you don't miss any of these epic stories. It's also the best way to support the Founder Files. It's the best way to make me happy as well. So thank you for being here, and enough of me speaking for now. Let's get into Jessica Boonstra from Yebo Fresh. Welcome to the Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Jessica, welcome to the Founder Files. I've been waiting to talk to the founder of Yebo Fresh for a long time because ever since I saw the trucks on the roads, I was like, that's a big company that's definitely not overly entrepreneurial. And then actually finding out about what Yebo Fresh is and the fact that you're the founder, and there's an amazing entrepreneurial story behind this, I had to share this on the podcast. So welcome. I'm very happy to have you here.
Awesome. Thank you. Very excited.
So Jessica, just to kick off, just tell me about Yebo Fresh as a business, right? So if people haven't seen any of your branding on the roads, if they haven't heard about the Yebo Fresh as a company, what is the business model? What do you do?
So Yebo Fresh is an e-commerce platform, I like to call it a marketplace, that services what we call general trade. Some call it Township market or the informal economy. In essence, what we have is agents and technology that place orders on behalf of spaza shop owners that are then fulfilled and delivered to, well, a spaza shop owner or a hair salon or any other type of business that operates in Khayelitsha or Soweto or Tembisa or you name it, anywhere in those underserved markets.
So Jessica, so many people have tried to tackle the e-commerce space. I mean, it's starting to really pick up within the township economies within South Africa. I mean, there's a couple players out there that I'm aware of, but I know that so many people have tried and failed. Right? What I want to know is how, did you manage to get it right in the first place?
I made the mistake that I see many others make. I spent many, many years working in the Netherlands in e-commerce, in modern trade, or in a European environment. And then coming to South Africa and you see that market and you do see the inefficiencies and the opportunities, you think, okay, let me take what works in America, what works in the Netherlands, and let's bring it to that market. And then you realize that it is absolutely, that is not the way to do it. I had to almost unlearn everything I knew about retail, about e-commerce, about technology, and then really listen to the market and reconnect the dots again. So that for starters, it is not about applying whatever works elsewhere and then taking it to this space, because it's got its very unique challenges. For starters, the environment is extremely volatile. So one day you'll have businesses that are open and that are serving the market. The next day might be riots, there might be xenophobia, there might be gangsters. The business closes and they operate next day somewhere else in a different way. Right, very, very volatile. And as you go into those areas, you have to be aware of, physically be aware of gangsters that might be coming after you and all the challenges that go with it. There is the logistics. Many places do not have addresses. So the address might be, it's, if you have the green container and then that big sign and then you go right and then you go behind the shack. That's my address, right? So you have to deal with that. Then there's a lack of access to data being very expensive in South Africa and a lot of people not having a smartphone, but being very, very careful of how they use a smartphone. So you can't just go with an app or let's take a Shopify platform and put it, put a shell on it. And so there's all these specifics that make the market very, very difficult and that makes that you have to listen and go deep and try and experiment and experiment and experiment. Many businesses do not have the patience, the resilience, the capital to get there. And we almost didn't. We struggled for 5 years, but I'm sure we'll get into that for a bit.
Yeah, we definitely will. I think the nature of it is that I'm starting an e-commerce business, providing a service and an offering that's very much needed. But then there's certain capabilities I need to bring into my business that I never thought I'd have to do, like security, for example. And I think about armed trucks as if it's a cash heavy business. It's I wouldn't think I'd in a early stage startup trying to find product market fit, having to invest in things in relation to security. But I'm jumping ahead into some of the spoilers. I know that you've had a very spicy journey, to say the least, to get to where you are, where you're at now.
Yeah.
But I think just I want to know about the founding story, right? So again, it's you are Dutch, you're in South Africa, you're starting this business in terms of a township economy. Just at face value, it's this founder for this business. I'm just super curious around how this started. So talk to me about that founding story, because what you also told me offline is that you never actually wanted to be an entrepreneur.
I never thought about it, indeed. I've been a corporate lady for many, many years of my life. I'm an engineer by background. And before I came to South Africa about 10 years ago, I worked for many years in Shell. I worked for many years in Ahold, one of Europe's leading retailers. So there's me being very comfortable in business, but then as a family deciding to go to South Africa, probably in pursuit of a bit of a purpose or more of a purpose in life. So here in South Africa, I'm doing a bit of consulting work. And then one day I met an amazing British entrepreneur who said, look, Jess, I know that you've got experience in retail and you've got experience in logistics, and I'm looking to invest in a business that does e-commerce for townships. Can you have a look at it and do due diligence for me? And I looked at the business and went, wow, this is really interesting. I never realized the size of this market, how it's brimming with entrepreneurship, the opportunities and the challenges. But the way that this business does it will not work. If you wanted to do it, you do it differently. So that's my feedback to the entrepreneur. And then he says, well, go ahead, build the business and I'll fund you. And I said, you're crazy. You are mad. Have you looked at me? I am not an entrepreneur. And he said, no, I think you are. You're a problem solver and you've got ideas and you should go ahead and try it. And I was actually reluctant. I was pushing back thinking, this is not for me. I'm not the Silicon Valley smooth talking entrepreneur type. I'm a mother. And that's not my thing. But we got going. And once you get your teeth into something that really, really drives your passion, then, well, that was the beginning and the rest is sort of history.
So on that is like you came to South Africa looking for a greater sense of purpose. You ended up finding yourself just through your network and an opportunity with another entrepreneur who's, got the very bullish mindset at early stages. It's the horse is irrelevant. It's the jockey that matters. It's like, this is the person that I'm betting on. I think this kind of industry and space, you've got the experience. There's something about you that I've realized that because of knowing you that I think you can make this happen. Yeah, what was that moment when you went from research, understanding, experimentation to like, okay, wow, there's a major source of drive and like I'm going to commit to figuring this out? What was that moment like?
So I really like solving a problem, right? And I realized later that that might be what makes you an entrepreneur. Now, if you see an opportunity somewhere and you see this massive challenge and you think there's something there, this market, all these movements of these spaza shop owners and these individuals and these people having to travel to the other side of town where there is no formal transport. And then there's mobile phones. All of this, if you put it together into some kind of mix, there will be a massive business here. And it's about 1/3 of the South African population. And it's a big, big part of the African population that shops in a very traditional way. And there's this revolution is going to happen. And I'd love to be the one to lead it. So that was the thinking that gave me sleepless nights and at some point saying, okay, let's give this a try. And the first thing we tried was looking at the consumer side. The first problem that I thought we weren't going to solve was that of the mother that come month end when she gets her, let's say, her SASA grant or a salary, she travels to ShopRite and then stocks up on 10 kilos of rice, 10 kilos of maize meal, 10 kilos of frozen chicken, and takes all of that back in a taxi. Big, big shopping trip. And the thinking was, that's inefficient. Why do we not bring all of that stuff to her? So we developed a model where we had very, very simple, based on a Google sheet and and pieces of paper. We had individuals going into my local area of Imazama-Yetu. I live in Hout Bay, where we have a local township, small one, 20,000 people. And we would go in there and say, look, come Saturday, rather than you going to Wynberg to shop, let us bring the goods to you. So tell us what you need, and we'll bring it to a local school you can collect. So it was sort of a agent-based collection model. And interestingly, that one took off very, very quickly. So within a couple of weeks, we had about 100 orders, about 20,000 Rand of sales. And then we're thinking, if we extrapolate that, that's already R500 million market right there. If you look at just what we were selling here and how quickly we were able to get success.
Sure.
So we raised some funds and we were able to do that quite quickly. And then we took it to something a bit more formal. So the first experiments were successful and we said, we've got something here. That's sort of month-end shopping. If we can tackle that, there's a business here. We can now start to go a little bit more formal. So after a few months, we raised some funds. We opened a small warehouse at the airport in the Cape Town airport here. And with the thinking, now we're going to conquer the Cape Flats. Wow, 2 million people. We are going to conquer this market. We're going to get the same traction as we did here in Imazama-Yetu. World, here we come. And then nothing happened. So the model that we had in Imazama-Yetu was not copyable towards Delft or Khayelitsha, Gugulethu, any of those areas. And we had very, very little traction. The realization was later that a couple of things were happening. For starters, that long shopping trip to Wynberg or to the shop was quite unique to that area. And people were starting to shop more and more close to home with the rise very, very rapidly. of spaza shops. And a spaza shop used to be, the word literally says it, spaza means hidden. Used to be a small container. And a lot of
I
people, when
didn't
I
know
think
that.
about a spaza shop, it means
Yeah.
hidden. So it used to be, somewhere someone from the garage sells a little bit of sweets, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of stock cubes. But this market has been growing quietly and very, very rapidly in the past few years. So by now, we've got about 100,000 spaza shops and about 100,000 street vendors. And about half of them are actually proper supermarkets. You'll go in and you'll find dog food, you'll find toys, you'll find frozen section, you'll find fresh food. They're massive and growing and growing and growing. So why would you go to ShopRite on a Saturday if you can actually shop in a beautiful corner shop right next to you? And that has been quietly happening and very, very quickly in the past few years. Come COVID, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Those shops have even been growing much, much faster because people couldn't travel to the mall. So our problem that we thought we had didn't really exist outside of our current area because it was the spaza shops that were actually already catering to the need of that consumer. She was able to go and shop quite close to home with quite a good setup. And we weren't aware of that. We didn't quite realize that. So around the period of early 2020, we're thinking, we have to change something. What is it? Definitely not a business to consumer market. And then COVID came, and as you remember, everything was shut down. So now the country, and particularly the market that we serve, the people living in townships, were overnight typically out of a job. If you were a gardener, you couldn't work. If you're domestic, you couldn't work. If you worked in a shop that didn't sell food, you couldn't work. So millions of people fell into instant poverty and instant hunger overnight. And we were right at the heart of that because we had set up an infrastructure and we had, of course, our employees, small team, and we had already made connection with local NGOs. And those NGOs stepped up and said, we have to do something. People are literally dying of hunger here. Let's get food parcels. Let's raise funds and get food parcels to these communities. However, when we chatted to these NGOs, they mentioned that, how do we do this? How do we buy for millions of people? How do we distribute for millions of people? And we said, you know what? We can do that. We've got an e-commerce business and we can buy and we can pick and pack and we can deliver. So these NGOs that we spoke with said, that's fantastic. Can you do it for us? We said, sure. What we didn't realize is that at that point we were 6 people and the demand was so big that overnight we went from servicing, a couple of hundred parcels at that point, struggling per week, to thousands a day. We grew from 6 people to 60 people in 3 weeks. We literally burst out of our warehouse. We had a small warehouse, as I mentioned, that 100 square meters. And then we were like, whoa, this place is filling up. Let's get the one next door. And then because it's COVID and nobody's on the road, the one next door was also empty, couldn't operate. So we knocked on the doors and said, we need the space. Can you help us out? And so we were just like bursting out of our seams and growing from a couple of 100,000 rand, less than 100,000 rand a month, to more than 4 million rand a turnover in less than 2 months. So yeah, there we are. We're suddenly an actual business. We are suddenly 60 people. We've got trucks driving around. We are an essential service provider. Whenever we struggle in an area because there's riots, then police will actually guard us because we are so essential that we are a lifeline of the community. So in that period, we go from being this little startup that was an experiment, remember with me going, I'm not quite sure about this, to a business that becomes a lifeline to hundreds of thousands of people. In that period, we delivered a total of 35 million meals equivalent. And we were the second biggest food parcel and sort of emergency relief distributor in the Western Cape.
No wonder I saw your branding all over the roads.
That's where you saw us, yeah. I'm sure you've seen a lot of us. We at some point I was asked to be in CNN, and I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? I'm asked to talk about South Africa as a Dutchie. So yeah, that was it was a
Sorry,
very exciting
actually, Jessica,
period.
on that, That's one
Mm.
thing that's one thing I'm curious about. Just naturally, the South Africa, there's still a lot of sensitivity around identity and race and gender. You brought up xenophobia
Yeah.
being an issue, specifically in this market, and I'm curious about
Mm.
that. But just around that, is like as a white female Dutch person coming to South Africa, starting this business in this market. Was there ever any like resistance that you found to that? Any kind of friction? Any challenges just because of being white, being a woman, and being Dutch? And also, if that, even if that's an ignorant question, educate me through that.
No, not at all. Not at all. I've been very aware of my privilege always. I've been lucky enough to grow up in a family where it was, evident that just like my brothers, my sister, and I would go to university. We would study, would get a job, all of that. So for starters, I grew up knowing nothing better than, you've got the opportunities and so also the responsibilities as the same way as the men. Here in South Africa, I did realize and learned so much about what it meant to have that privilege. Many of the women that I employ are single mothers. Many of them work on a tiny, tiny salary. And with that, raise 3 kids and take care of the rest of their family and need to get out of bed at 4 in the morning to take a taxi to get somewhere at work. These women are absolutely incredible. So where I never really thought about, being a woman, fine, I'm just, I'm just me. Here it is something that I'm very aware of. And I'm very aware of the struggles. Maybe not enough, but I try to understand and listen. Um, and I'm in awe of what so many incredible women around me have achieved. I'd love to see more women. I'd love to see more Black women in business and also on your podcast.
I would
Because
love the
wow,
same.
are they incredible? There are some absolutely amazing role models that I've met here. And so I've learned to be aware of, never thought of skin color, never thought of, woman versus man, but here you are forced to be aware of it and then realize the responsibilities and um the privilege that comes with it.
So you've mentioned the privilege, and I love the perspective there. But I'm curious to know if there was any uh, was there support, was there resistance, was there, because I think about the concept of like founder market fit to an extent, right? And participating in the space, was this just not a reality for you? Did you not ever have someone going, like, working with spaza shop owners, and anyone is like yeah, any form of just resistance just because of who you are?
Not at all from the customers, not at all. I think they're curious, like, who is this lady? What's she doing here? Um, but also, I think an appreciation that where lots of South Africans, white South Africans, will say, I'm never going. I've
Mm.
met lots of people who said, I've never been in the township, and I'll never go there. And maybe because of me being naive, maybe, like, why not? I've always asked why not, and that has been appreciated a lot by my customers, by my team. They're like, "Yeah, you are not scared of this? Like, maybe I should be, but let's understand it first. You know, help me not to take, um, uh, uh, you know, terminal risks, but help me understand. Help me understand." So it was all about asking questions. Where I have met some interesting challenges would be more maybe in the investor world, where pitching, uh, 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 from experience and from a lot of conversations I had, a lot of women will go and say, I've got a big ambition and this is what I think I can achieve, but I won't oversell. I will give you a dream that I think I can actually achieve, that I fully trust, that I'm confident in. Whereas a lot of guys will go in and say, yeah, and we will conquer the world. And I'm going to be 10 billion in 3 months. So there's a lot of, that sort of natural style that a lot of men have. They will oversell, and investors will know that they oversell. So they'll, in their heads, they'll do the math and go, this is a great ambition, but let us maybe divide it by 10. And whereas many women, it will go in and say, no, this is actually what I believe in. I've done the math. This. So it's a different way of pitching. And I had to be
Mm.
aware of that. And I've encountered that a few times when I listen to others and I would know what their market is and I know what the business model is. And I go, you've got a great business there, but it's not what you say. And it's a difference between, maybe it's a difference between men and women, but it's something that I have encountered a few times that I have to be aware of.
So, look, I hear you. I think there's definitely, I definitely agree in terms of this, that swings towards men versus women, because I find that female entrepreneurs that I engage with are more measured and realistic around what it is that they want to achieve, while men kind of run on their own confidence, sometimes ego, in terms of what it is that can be the case. And obviously, this is a large generalization at the end of the day. But I think there's also just a general theme that I've noticed in a lot of people seeking investment and a lot of entrepreneurs seeking investment in South Africa, is that there's an orientation towards viewing the fundraise as the success rather than the responsibility of building a sustainable business. And so because of that, they will sell what they essentially need to in order to raise that funding instead of actually prioritizing building a business. And I think that's where this can kind of get crossed, is because essentially they're selling an idea and a concept and a strategy. And whether or not that's successful, in them, they deem the fundraise in itself to be successful. And my hope is that what will change in time. And don't get me wrong, I think getting an investment, getting an investor, raising significant amounts of capital is a milestone to celebrate, because it's going to unlock the ability for you to achieve your strategy and your vision.
Yeah.
But I think that the difference is that if we treat that as a milestone rather than the goal, it means that it's the difference between I've made it versus I now have a huge responsibility. But that's a whole nother topic I could get into.
Yeah, that's a good point. And of course, we must be very careful of generalization. But indeed, it is something that I've learned to be aware of when dealing with investors. Like, okay, there's a different expectation here about what you want me to say about where we're going to go versus what I actually truly believe, which is still amazing and fantastic and incredible if we get there.
What was that actual difference?
Possibly having to do something with, okay, where will you be in 5 years? The answer that people like to hear is, I will conquer the world. Whereas the reality is, I know it's going to take 3 to 5 years to get to something that can actually cover South Africa. But if we get there, then we will have done something that nobody else has managed to do so far. And that in itself should be an incredible achievement that is then worthy of an exit or worthy of the next step. But don't ask me now how I'm going to conquer the world. I know that's going to be the next phase after that. So it's that type of sequencing, I guess, of expectations and of aspiration. That again, maybe being more measured, maybe going, okay, I'm also not a 25-year-old Silicon Valley, university dropout. I've seen quite a bit. So at some point you get a little bit more, okay, this is what I think can be done. And it is incredible and it's going to take tremendous effort.
But I think it's also a dash of realism, and what you're speaking to is, this is how I like to think about strategy. Is I don't believe in 5-year plans. I don't believe in 3-year plans, because when has a plan ever gone according to plan, right? And it's specifically within a time frame and targets. I think the difference is it's more you can have a strategy in terms of where it is that you want to be in a certain position, and we're capable of being able to do this. We have these strengths, we have these capabilities, we have this position within the market. We are at this kind of life cycle stage point of sustainability, if I can speak about this abstractly.
Yeah.
But then the point there is, like, what are the dependencies that we need to achieve in order to be at that point? And if that looks like certain targets, certain measurables, and certain like quantifiable aspects, then fantastic. But what is the logic of what is it that we need to build moving forward, rather than, like, in 5 years we're going to be this big? It's like that has never made sense to me.
Yeah, I think it's much more important to have a vision and an ambition about the impacts you're going to make, or what you're going to, your North Star. And in our case, it was that realization that stayed from the consumer to COVID to what happened next, that here is a market that is ready to be digitized. And if we do it the right way, or if it's done the right way, it will change so many lives for the better. it can actually improve quality of life for people who struggle most, or for the market that is, let's be honest, the bedrock of our economy. So that realization was always there, and it got stronger over time, even though we realized that, okay, the B2C approach didn't work. What we did during COVID was amazing, but it wasn't the end objective. We knew it was a step, a phase towards what happened next. So it was we had to change our strategy many times, but we never, our big, hairy, audacious goal remained. And it was very strong and became clear over time.
Well, what was your BHAG? What is your BHAG?
Our big, hairy, audacious goal was, our mission was to improve quality of life through digitization and access into the underserved market. I called it the township market back then. I started to call it general trade by now.
Okay.
Because the realization was that it's not just about a spaza shop in a township. There will be a spaza shop in city center. It's not just, the independent market, because there are huge independent wholesalers, but those are not the ones we're targeting. So it's quite difficult to put a definition on it. So many people will talk about the township market or the independent market, or by now we call it the general trade market. But it is those independent businesses that are smaller than your typical large wholesaler, that are independent, and that constitute a massive part of our economy and service about 40% of the consumer's needs every month.
Awesome. I love that. I love that transition. Okay, I want to go through, as a white male English-speaking South African who is kind of culturally trained growing up that townships are bad, you don't go there, you're going to be in danger. All the scripts, right? All the scripts, that's the nature, and like feeding into a huge aspect of our social segregation in South Africa. What is it that I think about? Because I love that mission. I both love it, and it also intimidates me at the same time, because it's like, okay, we're an e-commerce business, but that's super broad. It's like digitizing general trade in South Africa, which is amazing.
I'll make it more concrete for you in a bit.
Sure. But I also love that because it speaks to the infinite game of Simon Sinek in that essence, and it's something that can keep continuing without you. But let's go. Let me get practical around understanding the problems of the market and and what's happening there, because I think about, let's say a spaza shop is someone I would drive past in Cape Town, going through off the into Strand Streets, driving past the bus station, the train station there, and you've got all of these like tiny little vendors that are sitting there, whether they're selling fresh produce, whether they're selling cigarettes, whether they're selling like all kinds of things, the little shops there. It's all driven by cash. They're the ones having to collect their produce, and it's like, and some of them might have cars, some of them might have bakkies. I don't even know how this stuff is being transported back and forth. They're going home, they're coming back. There's safety risks that they're incurring. It's happening via cash as well. And that's just the nature of what's going on there. So what I'm trying to unpack and understand is this pivot that you made from like direct B2C to wanting to work with spaza shops now, after COVID. It's just, I feel like their needs are many, and their needs are quite complicated and quite complex in order to get this digitization from an e-commerce perspective. So I just want to unpack what is essentially life like for that customer. And because I imagine it's like you're almost starting again from scratch in many ways, because the problems are so different. I'd like to pause here for a moment to talk about why it is that we run the Founder Files in the first place, why we've done over 100 episodes, and why we have no intention of stopping anytime soon, and how it is that we go about actually funding this so consistently. And to start off with, the purpose of the Founder Files is to give established entrepreneurs practical stories and insights from people that have been there before, so you can avoid years of trial and error in scaling your own business. And the reason why this is so important to us is it relates very directly to what the purpose of Metavolve is, which is the entity that funds the Founder Files in the first place. And that is to accelerate the time it takes for entrepreneurs to build businesses that are able to thrive without them. Practically, what that looks like is our mission statement, to ensure that as many founders as possible can take a holiday where they actually switch off whilst their business keeps growing. And the reason why this mission is so important to us is because, as many entrepreneurs, we built these businesses to potentially work less, right? Have a sense of freedom. But we found ourselves working harder than ever. And we thought when we conquered these original problems around survivability and getting to product market fit, we then achieved growth. And then the nature of the problems that we have now fundamentally changed. And we found ourselves working harder than ever. right? We're working longer hours, we're making harder decisions, people are coming to us, we're having to put out fires, and it can feel so intense, and we're constantly getting pulled back into operations because of the fundamental reason that no one knows our business like we do. And this is where Metavolve comes in. We use strategy as the process to really download all of your knowledge, all your thinking about your business, about your market, about your product into your management team so that they can be empowered to execute while you focus on growth or frankly doing what it is that you want with your time. So if you want to hear more about what Metavolve does and how Metavolve can help you attain a new level of freedom in your scale up, then click on the link in the description below and let's have a chat and a curiosity call to see how I can share some of the insights I've learned from working with and interviewing over 200 business owners in the past 3 and a bit years. But that's it from me for now. Let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, I mean, you highlighted the problem and the opportunity right there. And this is exactly how we encountered it. So here we are during COVID and we're doing food parcels and we're doing bulk deliveries to soup kitchens. And then right next to the school or the soup kitchen that we're servicing, there's a spaza shop. And the spaza shop owner sees the bags of maize meal coming and the oil. And they come to our team and they go, hey, that stuff that you deliver to that school, I need it too. Is there a way that you can help me? And indeed, that realization exactly as you highlighted. So if I'm a spaza shop owner, and let's take 2 scenarios. One is the scenario of the South African business owner. Typically, 60% of the time it's a woman. She might have started the business on some of her savings or her SASA grant. She starts small from, let's say, her garage because she's got a nice home on Main Road, and she starts selling goods. Now, she is operating alone, right? And if she wants to stock up on her goods, she will have to travel to a cash and carry. And she doesn't have a car, typically. So she'll have to close shop, get in a taxi, travel to that cash and carry, buy her goods with cash, just hand to mouth, just as much as she can afford for the day, and then take it back. Or she'll negotiate with the bakkie driver that's standing outside of that wholesaler or media wholesaler. She'll make a deal, say, I'll pay you 200 Rand to get the goods to my doorstep. So then she goes in the car together and she comes back. She's got her goods for 2 or 3 days. And that's how she works. Day by day, stocking up on whatever she needs. And again, this might be 3 hours of shopping. This might be 200 Rand of transport. And all of that time she cannot sell. She cannot run her business. So you just can imagine this tremendous issue here. Furthermore, she's alone. So where does she get her insights? Where does she know what the best deals are? She's going to have to look at the internet. She's going to have to shop around. She's going to have to think about, what is best to stock, because she doesn't have the tremendous trillions of data points that a ShopRite or a Pick and Pay are gathering every minute about what shoppers want and how to price and where to buy. Then you've got about 90% of the businesses, the spaza businesses are Ethiopian, Somali, Bengali, Pakistani owned, 90%. And they are very successful because they operate in groups. So you'll have your clan, let's say, who shop together, a couple of cousins. They together between them, they own 10 spaza shops. And together they'll chip in to buy in bulk at your nearest wholesaler. They might have a few vehicles between them. So now they're operating together, collectively. They've got some buying power. They've got collective intelligence. They've got some capital because between them, they'll chip in. And if there's
they're
a young
operating
cousin,
essentially as a company with multiple retail interfaces.
Totally. And if I've got a young cousin, he might be an apprentice and sleep in my store for a couple of years. So he's going to learn the business. I've got cheap labor. He's going to take care of safety, of the security of my shop. By the time this guy's 20, he's done years of learning how to be a retailer. So now I'm confident enough to say to my cousins, let's chip in a couple of thousands of Rand. Let's get him going. And Ahmed has got a store. So it's very understandable that these guys are incredibly successful and that they now occupy about 90% of the market because they've got intelligence, they've got buying power, they've got experience, they've got skills, right?
Well, then you look at these single mother who like starting from their garage, they don't have a support structure, like even necessarily personally. So talk from a business perspective, it's building this stuff from scratch. And so there's just this mountain of challenges besides just the nature of South Africa and this market of everything from like digitalization to access to logistics to the cash-based economy, access to goods, access to insights, all of that and the fundamental thing is access to support. And that's also missing.
Absolutely. and realize that every challenge that hits South Africa will hit this market more. If there's load shedding and power goes out for 2 hours in Cape Town, it might go out for 10 hours or 2 days in any of those areas before it comes back up. Now, if I've got a meat business and I'm selling chicken dust on the street, all my meat is gone. That's my business there. I could be out of business. So it's an incredibly volatile and fragile market. However, we do see people, many women, who start a business with 700 Rand and now have 18 employees and run 3 in hamburger stand and a quota shop and a chicken dust. There's incredible entrepreneurship. So many, many challenges, but because the consumer need is so high and people want to shop close to home and they want the convenience of getting a beautifully fried chicken right across the street, there's a need for that. So the opportunity, again, is massive to bring digitization and to bring opportunities in. So what can we do for the spaza shop? Both the larger, more successful run business as well as the smaller business, we get the best deals to them. We get an agent that comes to see them and says, hey, are you aware that you should be stocking those products because they sell really, really well? Are you aware that you've got some money lying on the table there if you can price your goods a little bit higher here? Are you aware that you should be very careful that you can't stock pesticides next to food because that might kill people? So they come in and they assist the store owner with all kinds of insights, right? So there come the insights. Then, if you need the goods, let me place your order for you. Let me connect you to your nearest media wholesaler so you don't have to go. We've got people right there who can then pick and pack your order. We've got people who are driving around with bakkies. We'll connect you through technology, Uberized solution. We'll send the Uber driver to the wholesaler or the Uberized driver to the wholesaler, and then back to your doorstep. Goods will come to you. Furthermore, we will build a credit profile with us. So by now, if you know that you're a reliant customer, at some point we can start helping you with credits so that you can buy a little bit more. You can stock up before the weekend so that you can sell more during the weekend. And then after that, you'll repay us, right? So now you become a partner to these businesses and you get to know them better than anyone else. And you get to understand what they need, how they work, what brands they should be stocking, where the gaps are. That's data that you can sell to the brands. So now you become a source of data and access to that untapped market.
So where we're at in the journey now is you started the business, originally B2C, right? Saw this e-commerce opportunity. After that, COVID happened, right? Had to completely rethink the business. Started working with NGOs in terms of delivering meals, became the second biggest meal delivery business in South Africa, and doing 35 million meals. In the Western Cape. Still, that's nuts. 35 million is still, and that's just the Western Cape, and that's Czech, and that's just, makes me realize a lot about the fact that there's so much that happened during COVID that I was not aware of. But anyway, that's a rabbit hole. And then after that, after COVID ended, the need changes, the market changes, and there's also this realization that you got from the B2C and that first kind of transition of okay, let's take this properly to market now. We've done our pilot. Let's go to Delft. Let's go to Khayelitsha from Imizamo Yethu. And it's a completely different space, right? And it's predominantly from the fact that a lot of this is the market is now run by the spaza shops, and the fact that there are spaza shops available to meet these needs of these customers. And so the game changes. And throughout this time, I mean, you've obviously been a couple of years now that you've been running the business. There's this mission that's being gained, this BHAG, if you will, of really digitizing general trade. And so it kind of really starts to cement that mission. And so I'm just really summarizing the pieces together of the story in terms of this point of figuring out what this new model is, especially because it's not very complex. You're dealing with different kinds of customers in the space. When you mentioned the Ethiopian family, the cousins running 10 different retailer spaza shops, they've got some buying power. Versus the single mother from her garage doesn't have that kind of buying power and has similar kinds of challenges. And so there's this model that you've developed to be able to work with them all the way from insights through to goods, through to logistics, to education around and helping them improve their business. And I think, yeah, it's what I want to understand is I want to know the journey of being able to put that model together, because I can't imagine it was easy.
No, it definitely wasn't easy, and it was a lot of short experiments and a lot of iteration. Now, what is great about the market is that because it's so fragmented and because there's all these different spaces from Tembisa to Soweto to Katlehong, they're all different, and yet they've got common traits in terms of the challenges. We were able to do experiments in different areas. The essence of the model remained the same. I've got an agent who's out in the field that builds relationships with a spaza shop owner or a tuck shop owner or whoever trader in the market, and they'll talk to them about their needs. They'll register them so we get to know them. We've got a digital database now, and they'll either place an order on behalf of that business owner, or they'll say, here's my phone number, here's the phone number of the business, here's your WhatsApp service line, you can place an order here. And then we'll take care of fulfillment. During COVID and for long term thereafter, we had our own warehouses. So we would buy it from the manufacturer, we would pick and pack the goods in our warehouses, and then we would have your Uberized drivers, so drivers in the community. Through technology, we'd send them the gig, they'd come and collect, and they'll deliver. That model remained the same over time, but there were thousands of little iterations in how we did things, and how the order was placed, and how what exactly we sold, how we sold it. In the beginning, we were mainly doing food parcels type of setups. Later on, we went to a much, much broader offer. The way that we would deliver from little cars and motorcycles type of models to large trucks that did a large area. There was a lot of iteration and continuous learning. And that is very exciting if you're a business owner, that you get to do all these experiments, you get to optimize little parts of the chain over time. But I think we need to maybe zoom in a little bit more on that spaza model, right? The transition from being an NGO partner, in essence,
Yeah, please.
to being a
That's one
spaza
hell of a
shop
pivot.
provider. It really was. And then in a way, it was logical because, as mentioned, right next to that school is that spaza shop. And it could be an Ethiopian spaza shop or a Somalian spaza shop, a big spazarette next to Mama Vonya, who runs a small hole-in-wall spaza. And in e-commerce, it's all about optimizing your penetration. If you've got a truck going out, you better make sure that that truck makes as many deliveries as possible for the kilometers that it drives, right? And that it has an optimized balance between your margin per kilogram. So if I'm transporting goods, I'd rather make a good margin on the goods that I'm transporting, and I want to optimize my basket, and I need to make sure I optimize the penetration of my deliveries. So that's a game you play. And by adding as many shops as possible in the area, and by optimizing our transport over time, we managed to get to a model that sort of worked and that we could scale from there. We opened another warehouse in Johannesburg. And in the course of the 2 years after COVID, we managed to get to about 10,000 spaza shops that we signed up and that we service as businesses. So that was
Sure, that's
quite
amazing.
and it was very, very hard to get there because the challenges that I spoke about earlier remain. And they actually grew, because if you're now a business that is visible and you're in the area, then you'll have gangsters that are aware of a business that is coming through and that is transporting value. So now you become a target. And if you start operating at scale, there's all kinds of problems that are not so big a problem if you have 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 employees, but now you've got 120 employees. And now everything starts shaking because of the speed of the growth that you're handling.
So talk to me about some of those specific scaling challenges that you felt, right? I think there's so much I want to get into here. I mean, obviously the dealing with the gangsterism stuff that you like. The nature of scaling and why I love it is because, well, I love it, but it's a hard part of the business journey. But you start encountering problems that you didn't think you would have to solve, right? Gangsterism being one of them. What would you say were the main challenges that's like you started encountering in the scaling journey that didn't expect?
There's a few challenges that I think every business will encounter. And one is the change from specialism and agility to having structures, right? So having worked for corporates, I would always get quite rebellious when there were bureaucracies and rules and templates and, this is the way it's done. But if you quickly scale the business, you realize that what really worked in the beginning, a small agile team, everyone steps into everyone, everyone is basically generalists. Now you get into a position where that becomes a weakness, where actually you need specialists. You no longer need someone who can do and logistics and a bit of sale and a bit of buying. You need dedicated buyers who are really excellent at getting the best price and who can do that at scale. You need people who are deep logistics experts who can do your route optimization. So you start to actually introduce standard operating procedures and structures and templates and repetition, and all of the stuff that they used to sort of rebel against now becomes the literal strength of your business. And that was quite a change that we had to make very, very quickly. We went from, we are a couple of pirates out here that are doing great stuff during COVID, to now a very formalized business that had to have its standards and its systems and its rules. And we had to be religious about it, because operation is discipline. And retail is tiny, tiny margins. So everything needs to be optimized along that chain. So that was the first one. I think every business as it scales goes through that. That sort of from super flexible and agile to having certain formalities without wanting to lose your speed. So that happened. But then specifically for our business, we encountered challenges that I unfortunately quite unique to the market that we serve, and they include things like I mentioned the gangsterism, and the gangsterism would also infiltrate our business. So we had to deal with fraud that happened at a small scale with individuals, but it also happened at a larger scale with gangsters that had infiltrated our logistics team and at some point knew where the trucks would be going so that they could be hijacked. That was, of course, incredibly painful. And those are things that
that's
hopefully
devastating.
not every business in South Africa encounters.
Because I think the point of being South African is there's an expectation, and at least me, like South Africans who've grown up knowing that crime's a reality. But I think there's a different story when you're an entrepreneur. You're naturally very optimistic. You trust your team immensely, and I think there's the point of I can accept the fact that crime happens in the country, but to have it happen and kind of enabled by people within my business is a different kind of betrayal.
Yeah, it's tough, and for a while I took it personal. I felt this individual that I trusted with so much and that has spent so much time with me is now, kind of, and for a while it got me into quite an insecure space. I thought I had some people knowledge, and it turns out I was all wrong. So it was and is essential to at some point separate the two. One of the things I really learned over time is to be very, very hard on performance and to be very soft on the individual. Because there might be lots of reasons why this individual is doing what they are doing. Doesn't mean that we will accept it. Yeah. So let's go back to the situation where you might be the only breadwinner in your area or in your family, and people know that kids are hungry, etc., etc. But you are the one that's working in that warehouse, and that warehouse is filled with all of those goods. And how easy it would be to slip some of that and take it back home. That's understandable. It's still not acceptable.
Uh-huh.
So those are the things that you have to balance. Then the gangsters will find you and will threaten you, and they do. So we have had team members who in their homes, broken in at night, and people holding a gun to their baby and saying, "I'll shoot you, baby, if you don't do what I tell you." So now it's understandable that person says, "Of course, I'll pass on some logistics." Doesn't mean it's acceptable, but it's understandable. So I had to, and as a team and with the trusted team members, we built a lot of skill and resilience around this matter over time. So how to make sure that you've got your very strict controls, your very strict rules. If something wrong happens, unfortunately, it's not 3 strikes, you're out. It's 1 strike, you're out. We have to do that. But on the other hand, there's compassion for the individual that is going through the time and through that challenge that might bring them to the point that they're at. Does
Can you
that
talk
make
me
sense?
through that? Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Can you talk me through it in more depth? Because I think that there's an element or an abstraction that I'm thinking through here is about the fact that now we're having to combat crime in order to ensure that there's not waste within the business, right? At that level, it is a business concern, but there's also a safety in terms of employees at the same time in terms of taking care of that. Like, yeah, just how did you go about like weeding out the crime within your business, both externally and internally, and how you started? What did you have to put in place in order to combat this?
Very strict rules, for starters. So indeed, the rules had to be uh, extremely clear around what is done, and it had to be equally applied. So as an example, in the beginning, when I would come to the warehouse and would drive out, then the security guard would go, you're the boss. And I would tell him, absolutely not. We're making an example here. You are going to check my car exactly as thorough as any other individual. You're going to check my bag. We're going to do it in front of everybody because there's no exceptions here. What applies to the workers in the warehouse applies to me, and maybe even twice as firm. So we're going to set an example here.
Because sorry, just on that, but before, like, another reason to do so is because of the what can happen with the complacency around crime is it's not just around, like, yes, I might be uncorruptible. I don't think anyone's necessarily uncorruptible, but I might be uncorruptible as the boss, and you might recognize me. But what happens if there's a situation that there's someone with a gun hiding in the boot or the back seat that you just wave through, and I'm being held hostage in my own car coming through the situation? It's got nothing to do with the fact that I'm the person driving it. Is
Yeah,
the fact that it's like, is every vehicle entering the space safe to do so?
absolutely. It's for everyone's safety. So the very, very strict rules and applying them, to everybody. So often, another example is you'd have people coming to me saying, Jess, I can't afford my kids' school fees this month. Could you please, can I get my salary paid early? And the temptation is to say, of course. I mean, how important is it? School fees, the business can afford it. So the temptation is to say yes. The realization was that absolutely you cannot do that. Because if I did do it for Cam, I'd have to do it for everybody else as well. And the business cannot carry that. So there had to be a very strict yes for everybody or no to everybody. And in most cases, the answer had to be no to everybody, right? So unfortunately, very strict from that perspective. However, in the business, there was lots and lots of time to sit together and to talk about the challenges. I'd have many people come into my office, we'd cry together, we'd have hugs. I, listen to the situation. We make long walks around the warehouse. So I learned a lot about the challenges. I'd learned a lot about how this world works. But then still, in terms of the rules, it was very clear that we had to be this strict because we wanted to survive and grow as a business. So we spoke about that a lot.
That's super tough as a human, right? I think the point there is and this is the hard part about leadership and entrepreneurship that I think a lot of people don't realize until they're there, is that the importance is the sustainability of the organization and the decisions that we need to make there is that it's that at a micro level, it can seem really unjust to an individual because it's about the fact that, like, my request isn't that hard and complicated, right? You have the resources, you have the power to be able to help me. And you're saying, no, how can you be so heartless? And you're sitting there with that human being going through the pain, having the compassion with them. But it's and juggling the point of being a compassionate human being, but also about the fact that it's like, but I can't actually help you. Is it tough to well it's, and sorry, not even that, is I'm being I'm being a compassionate human being. I have the ability to be able to help you, but yeah, it doesn't make sense for me to do so. It's really hard. How do you emotionally navigate that, just as Jessica?
it is very hard because I'm also a mother. And of course, as a human being, you listen to these stories you um, and you get close as a team because you go through so much together. Um, the way that I think all of us together work through this is to keep an eye on the bigger picture. So the realization that indeed, if I help this individual now, and it could be 5,000 rand, and we've got 120 employees, it would mean 5,000 rand times 120 employees, and we can't carry that. And it would mean that 120 people would lose their jobs.
Yeah.
So rather than saying yes to this individual, which means that we have to, again, say yes to others because we apply the same rules across everyone. Let us make sure that they've got job security for the future. Let us make sure that we can upskill each other. Let us make sure that we learn and grow on how to deal with this as a team. So it was always about the bigger picture. The problem in front of you is parts of the puzzle, but the bigger picture is what matters in the end. And that was the way to do it. But yeah, honestly, I've got, of course, I had sleepless nights about those things.
No, it's tough. What you're speaking to is also why companies like Pay Me Now and Gem exist, right? Is because the fact that is like to
Yeah.
take that on as the employer is very, very difficult, and those companies and services are there to do so.
Yeah, and we worked with them, by the way. We introduced those things.
Good. I'm
Yeah.
glad. I'm glad to
But
hear
yeah,
that.
yeah.
If not, I would have connected you with the founders to help you do so. But yes,
Yeah.
you wanted to add?
I wanted to add that the challenge, as often, the challenge is also the beauty of the situation. So where we got to see a lot of the ugliest bits of South Africa because of who we are and what we do and where we operate, I believe we also got to see the best and the most beautiful bits of South Africa. And I'm not talking necessarily about the amazing mountains and the beaches and all of that. I'm really talking about the people. The people that I got to meet and that I get to work with every day are incredible. And again, I know that we speak quite a bit about the crime and the fraud, and because they are a part of the reality of my journey and of this business. But the incredible people who build something out of absolutely nothing, who start as a cleaner and then work themselves up to an operations manager within a couple of months. The people who do not let go of learning and spend every single moment on their phone to upskill themselves so that they can knock on my door and say, Jess, I'm ready to take on the next challenge. Can I go ahead and learn what it's like to be a buyer? Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And that is something that I do want to just emphasize because, the bad stuff is bad, but the good stuff is incredible.
And I actually want to go a bit deeper into that because I think that's the beauty of South Africans is that there's so much hardship that South Africans have gone through historically, currently go through in so many ways. And there's just a very deep resilience, but also drive that South Africans have in order to be able to achieve something. And the biggest problem that we have and the biggest frustration that I have, people will talk about access, people talk about resources. For me, it's more just pathways. Right, so it's like if there are pathways for people to have those stepping stones, they will take it themselves, and it's not an access thing. It's around the fact that it's like I like because I have all this motivation, but I've got too many things to worry about. So waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, doing all this at the same time. How do I access the opportunities to do this? It's around. It's like this. I don't see parts. Like I want to move forward. I want to be ambitious, but I don't see a direction. Right, and I think that's super challenging. But I think the point there is like the nature of this is also the beauty of entrepreneurship. This is the beauty of business, the beauty of small businesses. This is the fact that when you are succeeding as an organization, and for me, this is also, I guess, the bigger picture antidote to those smaller problems is the amount that we grow and become successful as an organization, the more people we're able to employ, but the more pathways there are to success through our organization or even outside of it, right? By what you're able to learn and being able to do that. And that is way more meaningful than it is to just solve the one person's problem around I can't afford to pay school fees now, even though that breaks
Yeah.
my heart, is about the fact that it's like let's get a service provider that can solve this for the entire workforce, I'm not as much as this pains me. This is the hard part about leadership and the decisions that we need to make, is that I'm saying no to that in order for me to say yes to the pathways that I can create for hundreds.
Yes. Yeah. And I think role models are incredibly important here as well. So in a business where you see one of us who started just like me, as a general worker maybe, or as a cleaner, and now this person has worked so hard and has done the right things, and now they are supervisor. And the next time they're regional manager, having those role models and seeing that it's possible is incredibly important as well. And I think that's essential. It's part of what you call the pathways. If I see, like literally see it, I don't only have to visualize it, but it's right there. This person has done it, so it's possible, and I can learn, and I can, I've got something to climb up to.
So what you've highlighted is one of my simplest like things I like to say about leadership. Human beings are incredibly complex, but we're not complicated at all. We forget that we are actually just mammals and great apes. And what I say by that is monkey see, monkey do, right? And so the problem with leadership is the fact that and you, especially from my corporate experience, and you probably know this as well, is the frustration is you'd have someone in leadership say, okay, cool, this is the path, this is the direction, this is what we're going to do, but they don't change their behavior. And they expect everyone else to change their behavior accordingly. And then they find is like, why are people so resistant to change? it's, it's actually quite simply the fact that it's because of you are not role modeling that behavior. And the point there is like, this is what people need. And I think people miss the point of what role model is the fact that role model isn't someone on a pedestal. It's not someone who's superior. It's about someone who can demonstrate behavior that I can see, okay, I know what that looks like in action and practically how to follow that, instead of a theory around or an idea. And that's simply what it is. And so from a leadership perspective, but also, and that's where basically what leadership is. Leadership is simply the capacity that you have for other people to follow you. And the only way you can do that is through behavior. And having people to that can role model the right behaviors and show that creates those pathways.
Yeah, I fully agree. And it's incredibly powerful to see that in action, and very encouraging. So again, I often get asked, when you go into those markets, doesn't it depress you? All that poverty and all that scarcity. And my response is often, no, it inspires me. Every time I go into market and try and do it as much as possible, never enough, I come back inspired, because I see how much people can do with how little, and how actually that economy that a lot of people look at and go, and again, too poor, too dangerous, too messy for me to go in. How promising it is, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more. But I'm sure it will leapfrog from a technology perspective, because it's got such tremendous potential, and the need and opportunity of this market digitizing and growing and leapfrogging it's right there. It's inevitable in my perspective.
Talk me through that. What are you saying?
So what am I seeing? I'm seeing a massive community that does have cell phones and smartphones, that is ready for, that has buying power, even though it might not be the same level of buying power that we see in the high streets, or let's say on the Camps Bay Boulevard, but definitely has buying power. And the opportunity of technology to make a huge difference right there is tremendous. I'm thinking about AI, for example, right? So for a long time, language was a bit of a barrier. Let's take my Ethiopian and Somali business owners as an example, right? Many of them speak some English and maybe have learned to speak some Afrikaans or Xhosa or Zulu. But properly dealing in business in English might be a challenge. Now with AI, I can put a solution in place that speaks perfect Amharic or speaks perfect Arabic and converse with my customer in exactly the language they need. Spaza shops that do not have individual intelligence on what is the best way to price something, where the best deals are, what is hot and growing in the market. Connecting all those businesses, and they almost become a neural network of intelligence, of convenience shops that are just around the corner and know exactly what the consumer wants. If you can connect those insights, and you can provide every shop owner with exactly the right insights on how to optimize their individual shop, and because they're already at the right place. So imagine the power of that. Imagine the power of visual recognition. Going into your shop and being able to just quickly scan it and then say, this is how much stock you have, because you currently don't have a stock management system, right? But this is the stock you have. This is the value of the stock. This is what you are missing out on. This is, again, what you should be, what you're overstocking on. This is how you can optimize your shelves. Imagine that. It was only available to the ShopRites and the Pick and Pays and of this world till now, but soon it will be available to that market. And the power of it is gigantic.
So you've clearly got this vision for how you can see a change in the economy, change in digitization. I mean, immediately what you rattle off there is like there's a couple startups that I know that are tackling like natural language translation in real time through AI, right? And I think there's it's amazing technology, but it's up to them finding how to apply this. I know some startups are doing that in call centers, for example. But this is what you've highlighted as a massive opportunity to be able to apply it through. And I mean, I keep carrying on with this point around pathways, but there's still that how do we take that pathway to market? And it's through B2B like you as well. I want to know about Yebo Fresh, and how is it that you see yourself participating in that vision? Like how are you going to make this happen? Like what do you see the future holding for you in this digitalization of the space?
So one thing you need is scale. You need scale and you need the right partners. And Yebo Fresh independently grew to, as I mentioned, service about 10,000 spaza shops and be active in 25 townships, about 120 people. But at some point, the realization came that we would not be able to do this alone. And even if we brought in partners, you need massive capital. You need a huge technology boost. We were not going to be able to raise the 20, 60, $100 million that it would take to get to where we wanted to be down the line. So we realized we needed a partner. So in the course
Or you could, but it would just take you way longer than it needed to.
And the capital. Yeah. So doing what we did would down the line be able to get us about 10% EBIT margin. But we also realized that the volatility that we ran up against is always about 10%, right? So you have the hijackings and you solve the hijacking problem, and you manage to solve it. You put better controls in at some point and you manage to weed out those issues. And then you've got riots, and then you manage to overcome the riots. And then you've got the government coming in with regulate. There's always load shedding, you name it. There's always 10% volatility that will eat that margin. And you get better at problem solving. You get really good. We have been solving so many problems, but that realization came at some point that if we keep doing what we do, we are down the line. There's 10%, and 10% is good for a retailer. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I know in many tech businesses that makes you cry, but for a retailer, that is a pretty good because of the scale and because of the volume. 10% at 200 billion, which is the potential of this market, is quite a lot. So we realized we were not going to get there independently, and we are not even going to get there with some of the great partnerships that we have. We had a partnership with Standard Bank. We had a couple of other great partnerships with suppliers. We are going to have to do something radically different. So we decided to look at an acquisition opportunity. And early 2024, we got in touch with the party that eventually acquired us, which is Smollan Group. And this is honestly a match made in heaven. And I'm not just saying that because I currently work for them. It was a big decision to move from the independent entrepreneur I was to partner with this business. But again, keeping in mind what we wanted to achieve, and keeping in mind that and realizing that the only way to actually get there was to get ourselves a massive, ability to superpower what we had learned and what we had built so far. This was the way forward. And the advantage of what Smollan had already built was a presence in the general trade market, but on behalf of specific clients. Smollan do merchandising. So they put people essentially in stores that service brands. And they do that for modern trade and very, very successfully. So you'll find people working in your ShopRite and Pick and Pay and other businesses on behalf of the brands. And they had started to do that quite successfully at scale in general trade, but on behalf of one specific client. So there we have a corporate, no, sorry, I shouldn't say corporate, a multinational, but a family business that had already built a very successful scale in the market, but didn't have the technology, it didn't have the sort of data capability, didn't have the bigger picture ambition that we had. And now we have Yebo Fresh that had learned to build technology and insights and sort of customized marketplace solution for the general trade market, but didn't have the scale. We put the two together. And that acquisition was completed in December last year. So now about the way forward, very exciting for us. We get to entrepreneur still. We get to build a solution that still connects a spaza shop to the rest of the value chain, to the MIDI wholesalers that it buys from, to the delivery partners out there. We have got technology that underlies all of that. But we also have big brands that are behind us that are actually willing to sponsor some of that huge cost of building that chain and building that presence. So today, we have 55,000 spaza shops on our books that we serve. We've got a team of about 220 people that are active at the spaza shops and in the MIDI wholesalers. We've got technology that underpins that end-to-end. And we're investing massively in all the exciting stuff that I just mentioned. Better payment solutions, AI solutions, insights, connecting spaza shops with advanced insights, connecting brands with what's happening in shops, creating insights, and then reselling that to suppliers so that, again, we can fund this engine. So we're now in a space where we get to basically accelerate the work that we've been building towards for 5-6 years.
Yeah, that's so incredibly exciting, Jessica. And it's just like even the way you got to the end there's this energy, this palpable energy that you're talking through. What I want to know now is that what still has been in the back of my head, which I wanted to unpack as a question, is it's like I found the principle that you said, and I love this. Reason why I love principles is because they can transfer across domains and context. Is that the be very hard on performance but soft with the person, right? I really love that. And so I think that insight was there. And the reason why I want to go back to that point, but the question that I'm unpacking is, and I'm an out loud thinker, so bear with me, but the nature of the shift that your business went through of going from general team that any scale up goes through is now needing standardization, standard operating procedures. You as a leader now need to balance this trick of being soft with the person, hard on performance, right? Kind of formalizing the scale, constantly dealing with this volatility as you're growing and scaling. Now joining a large multinational with a whole different other set of capabilities, structures, requirements in terms of what's going on. So the main question that I have is that from that point of realization of hard on performance, soft with the person, through to this point of acquisition with Smollan Group, and now transitioning to this next vision, what are the changes that you've gone through as a leader in order to be able to grow yourself, to be able to handle these new stages that the business went through?
This whole journey has been a journey of nonstop growth. And if I think back to how it was for me years ago when I worked for a multinational, right, for Shell and for Ahold, I enjoyed, they always talk about mastery, autonomy, and purpose, right? The drivers that make people happy.
Intrinsic motivation.
And that more important, in terms of motivation, that I'm much more important than financial incentives. And I agree there. But there's an element here of, I never reached mastery in entrepreneurship. Oh, very, very far from it. I've been for 6 years in the consciously incapable zone, constantly realizing that this world is new to me. It's so different from, I ran a team of about 300 people at Ahold. And yet starting with 6 people and delivering goods from my garage with my car, and as it was in the very beginning, was harder. It was way more way more difficult than that. And then fundraising, and then the responsibility of having people on payroll and not knowing at some point whether you'll make payroll end of month, and the responsibility of not knowing whether my people will be safe on the street. It was a constant search of how on earth do I do this? How, how will I get through this? And when will I ever feel that I've even slightly got it? Let alone mastery, never got to mastery. But that sense of, oh, I'm sort of on top of it. I never got to that point, which is exciting. And it was very, it was an experience of, of humility, I guess. But also the best business school I could ever go to. So now working for a multinational again is a very different experience because I've gone through that. I've learned to to know myself a lot better. I've seen a lot of the best and the worst of South Africa and of leadership. But I actually try and keep myself in that consciously incapable stage now. So I spend a lot of time constantly learning what I don't know yet at the moment. So at the moment, we're currently investigating a lot of AI, for example, and the world is moving so quickly around us that we have to be aware that we don't know what's around the corner. And we have to be aware that we don't know how quickly this market will transform. So that has been that experience of being in the uncomfortable zone and thus the growth zone, but the painful one for so many years. I'm going to try and stay in it for quite a while because I think that continuous growth is very, very healthy, even if it is stressful. And that's another learning that I have got. It's very interesting. A while ago, people asked me, so what is the biggest difference between where you are now and where you were, let's say, a year ago? And it is that I sleep, that I actually get some proper sleep. Because as an entrepreneur, I was nonstop obsessing, and even at night in my dreams, obsessing about the problem to crack and about honestly, the stress that comes with the responsibility. And now knowing that some of it lies safely within a corporate that has patient capital, where we get to breathe a little bit and we can look beyond next payroll and even beyond the next fundraise. All of that is safe for a while. I can look at longer horizons. I can breathe. I can be more strategic, but it also means I can sleep. So on a very, very personal level, that's different. So I'm going to try and keep the excitement and the continuous learning and the continuous achieving for more, staying in the growth zone. But I'm also enjoying some sense of calm, some sense of it's okay. There's some stability.
Sure. So talk me through that. Thank you for sharing. And I want to go one level deeper now because one thing I know about human beings is the very large majority of us really struggle with uncertainty. Right. That is probably one of our most predominant stresses. It's shown in the markets. There's nothing a market hates more than uncertainty. It's what's happening in the world now with Trump and tariffs and the world feels like it's going mad because of this, because I don't know how this is going to go. And it's just a response to uncertainty. And the nature of entrepreneurs are inherent problem solvers, right? And this is why we don't sleep, is because we have a problem and we'll go and it's like, how is it that we're going to solve this? And the nature of it. And also what you spoke to there is humility. It's a value that I hold very dear to myself as well. Is about this like constant learning, constant openness, constant feedback. But I can't help myself is like the saying there is like, I'm choosing to consistently stay in this realm of consciously incapable. Like sounds, as you said, also stressful and anxiety inducing because it's constantly in this realm of like, when do you feel like you've got an element of control? That's also something entrepreneurs are constantly trying to seek in terms of their business. Like I'm working on it. I'm in control of the business and what's happening here. And it seems like you've done something relatively paradoxical, whereas like I'm actually let go of that and I'm choosing to be in this space. I want to know what help me understand that in a bit more depth and what that looks like, because I'm trying to wrap my head around it and I need your help.
I guess indeed when Stefan, the British entrepreneur, said you are an entrepreneur, I think what he meant was he saw indeed the problem solver in me and the person that is honestly a little bit of a thrill seeker. And it is something that my family often, when I come back with the stories that I do, they're like, oh, you know, uh, it's a little bit scary, but it's also exciting. And that I wouldn't live my life any other way. So, for example, when you invited me to the podcast, I shared with you that I'm terrified of these things. Absolutely terrified. Right? We spoke about that. But, it's feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And then finding the joy that comes with it. So I'm aware that I am like that. I'm aware that I always need a new challenge, and that where I find my calm is that moment of, okay, I've done it. I've overcome a fear. I've had the dopamine rush. I can now sort of enjoy and relax and for a little moment until the next thing come. I will always be like that. So I need to find my balance in time with friends, time with family, going crazy on a dance floor, hiking a mountain. That's the way I go through life. But I've also learned that my team doesn't have to carry the burden of my personality. So where I'm always running for the next thing, a million ideas, don't mind pushing harder and harder and harder. I need to make sure that my team doesn't always feel that stress and doesn't always feel that they're running after the next big thing, that there's a sense of clarity and stability and structure, right? So that is something I'm trying to constantly balance between me already being on the next planet and striving for the next big thing. And then for my team, trying to be very clear of, guys, we've got priority, 3 things we do today, 3 things we do tomorrow, 3 things for the next month. This is a project plan. These are the milestones. Let's go and do it. Don't get distracted. And meanwhile, let me manage my crazy ideas on what is next and what's around the corner. So I'm not sure whether that answers your question, but it's dealing with your own personality and your thrill seeking, and meanwhile making sure that your environment gets to hopefully not suffer too much around it and still get some sense of the excitement.
It partially did, because it's also brought up another question, because I really want to go deeper into that, the clarity with your team points. But the word that I love the fact that you said thrill seeking, because the nature of an entrepreneur is it's like there is that thrill, like going out there, and the word that came to me is also courage. And there's a quote that I really love, is courage is knowing that something's probably going to hurt, but choosing to do it anyway. Stupidity is
Yeah.
the exact same thing. And that's why life is hard.
Oh,
And
wow. That is, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so I think that's the challenge, right? Is
Mm.
like that's why sitting in this realm of consciously incapable and not knowing what I don't know is the fact that it's like I don't know if this is courageous or stupid. Right. And in terms of that approach, and like that's the stressful part. And it seems like there's this and I think that's the deep, maybe a conviction or a self-assurance at the base level is like, no matter what the path is, I know I've got me, right? I've got my back and I'll be fine. And all of this is making me think about Brene Brown, actually. And it's really this
Yeah.
kind of
Vulnerability.
courage, yeah, to put yourself out there. And it's about the fact that it's
Yeah.
and I think what's exciting me now in the way you're describing this is a whole another level of leadership, right? Where it can really be truly inspirational leadership in a way. It's like because I'm opening myself up and to being vulnerable and being courageous and not knowing what I don't know, and it's
Mm.
this irony of a huge new level of ambition, a huge new level of courage, but it comes with a massive level of vulnerability. But then and then a groundedness in terms of the fact that it's like I'm still going to put myself out there anyway, and I think that's a really exciting space to be. I think it can be daunting. I think a lot of people are very afraid of that naturally, but I think leaning into it is really powerful.
It is. What I often discuss with my team is life is just too short not to go all in. If you do something, and we speak about that a lot. If you do something, let's do it right. Let's give it our everything. Let's make sure that if we deliver a product that has our name on it, let's be damn proud of it. Let's not do something half. Life is just too short to do, to basically waste your time on something that's just not good enough. If we have an experience, let's go all in, whether it's a fun night out or whether it is, being with our customer. Let's be there 100%. For me, it's this realization that life is just too short not to do it properly. And for me, therefore, life is also too short to build a business that doesn't, in the end, have an actual positive impact, to not make a positive change in people's lives. I could have stayed in the Netherlands and had a very nice career and made much more money than I would have made working in South Africa. But it would have been sort of boring because, again, we left in search of a purpose and in search of making a bit of a difference. And it's exciting to be able to do that through business, because there's just not enough time to, be working every day and then think in the end, what have I done? I've sold more stuff to people who don't need it. That's not for me.
Well, it sounds like you found exactly what you were looking for.
Yeah. I think I did. Look, ask me again in a couple of months. I might get at some point get impatient. But I do love about this business that they're giving us as a team the opportunity to actually be entrepreneurial. But then they do say, look, we've got some guardrails, because there's rules and there's a big business. But more importantly, we've got your support. If you need HR, if you need technology, we've got it right there, because with this incredible business, we're in 65 countries. There's someone who can help you out here. Tell us what you need so that you can grow faster. And that is, I feel very, very lucky and grateful for that.
And I think that also speaks to why you're able to lean into such vulnerability of courageous leadership, is because you have an immense support structure now. And it's not about being part of this large organization. It's actually just about the fact that it's like, I have the support that allows me to go and be courageous.
Yeah. I've had that throughout the journey. Incredible board, incredible investors, fantastic team, amazing family and friends. I think if we talk about learnings, we didn't get to that, but I must acknowledge just how fantastic the investors have been that got on board of this journey, and the board members who provided guidance along the way. They have seen some pretty rough stuff as well. I'm sure they've had some sleepless nights over us doing what we did, but they have been fantastic. And the support structures have been indispensable. You're absolutely right.
Love it. Jessica, unfortunately, this is all that we have time for. So I think just to wrap this up, what's the one question that I haven't asked you, that I should have asked you, that you'd like to answer now?
I know you do this, and I think I took notes, but I got so carried away with the... maybe not a question, but one important takeaway that I just wanted to share still, because I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs and we often have the conversation around this point. And that is that you are not your business. And we get so passionate about what we do, and that's amazing. It's more than you're married to your business. At some point you feel like you are your business and it becomes your personality. And in a way that's lovely, but in a way it's also dangerous. Because if your business fails, are you a failure? Or maybe even more dangerous, if, my business grows to the size of Elon Musk's, should I have his ego?
Exactly.
I think that's incredibly dangerous. So disconnecting every now and then, taking a huge step back and saying, I'm not my business. If it's great, I'm still me. I'm all these other things. I'm still the mother and the friend and everything else that I am. And yes, it's amazing that I get to do this, but having a disconnect every now and then is, I think, incredibly healthy. And I think more of us should do that more often. I'm also speaking to myself a couple of years ago. So
love it. Jessica, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your courageous story and journey. Thank you for having the courage to do something that you're terrified to do, and that's actually step onto a podcast and have this conversation with me. Really excited about the mission that you have for the company that you built and for what you're going to be able to achieve with this multinational now. I think you're going to do absolute wonders for the space. And I guess well done for also having the courage to change your life, to seek greater purpose, be persistent in going for that, because now the position that you're in is inspiring. And I'm looking forward to following the rest of the journey.
Thank you so much.
We didn't quite get into it at the end of the episode, but one thing that Jessica said towards the end is this challenge I see all the time with founders. And the way I see it is that the complexity that we as founders can handle in terms of our vision and the courage that we have to go after it is that a lot of people on our team can't really handle that complexity just yet. And so it's the challenge that we face in terms of how is it that we take this ambitious thinking, but also structure and sequence it and package it in a way that our team can take and run and buy into, and they can have clarity. And this is exactly what we do at Metavolve, right? We help you download all your knowledge, all your thinking out of your head, get it on paper, but also most importantly, build it into your team so that they can be empowered to execute and you can be freed up to focus on growth and innovation. Now, if you want to find out how it is that we go about doing that and you want to have a chat because this is something that you're currently struggling with and you want to get some insights from me around how is it that you can really get this knowledge out of your head and into your team, or just really just clarify some of your thinking, this is what I do, right? So reach out to me, follow the link in the description below. Let's have a quick chat and I'll see how it is that I can help you. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for listening to another full episode of The Founder Files. I'll see you next time. Cheers for now.